Hello everyone, and welcome to this session on virtual reconstructions. And my name is Ming Sun. I'm from Nottingham Trent University, and I am chairing this session today. And for this session, we have three presenters. So we have Benedict Davillet of Nottingham Trent University. We have Cinem Gana from Middle East Technical University in Turkey, and Namin Ali Hani Hossein from Arab Academic for Science and Technology and Maritime Transport in Egypt. So three presenters will do their presentation first, and afterwards, we have the question and answer after all three presentations. So while they do the presentation, if you have any questions, and you can type your question in the chat, so that during the question and answer session, we can pick that up. Or alternatively, you can just write down your own question and ask the question at the end after the presentation. As a chair, I'll also be asked to remind you the conference policy. And so this session will be recorded officially, and so the recording will be made available afterwards. And as audience are not or asked to not take their own recording. So no audio or video recording or taking screenshot. And so I will not repeat all the details of the conference policy. I think they can be reviewed on the conference website. And then I think, as I said, the main thing is I need to remind everyone, do not record your own, or don't do any recording, and so you can use the official recording afterwards. Okay, so I think we probably get on with our presentation. So the first presentation is from, let me just go to the details. Yeah, Dr. Benedict Davillet is from Nottingham Trent University, and she is the principal investigator for a HRC-funded research project. And her research focus is on improving heritage intervention in post-disaster recovery efforts, starting after the 2005 earthquake in Chile. And when she co-founded a Tapapaka project, and this project contributed to the 2010 earthquake recovery. And yeah, she is also a co-founder of DLA Scan Architectural Studio, and she led a 3D laser scanning teaching cluster at the Bartley School of Architecture, UCL in the UK. And her presentation title is Reconstruction and Recording, Earthquakes and Adaptation of Heritage Settlements in Chile. Benedict, you can start your presentation by sharing your screen.
Thank you, Ming. That was very nice. I have to say that there is a tiny update of the title. I mean, it's just the program has the shorter version. So today we'll present Reconstruction on Record, Reframing Tradition as Adaptation in Heritage Settlements of Chile affected by earthquakes. And just let me go to the PowerPoint here. There. Yeah, can you see my PowerPoint okay, right?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Brilliant, thank you. So reconstruction is the ultimate type of intervention a building can experience, usually contested in the context of built heritage. The use of previous records and available remains is a way to settle debates around it. In the case of earthquakes, rebuilding processes follow periodically and are unquestioned due to the necessity to recover the dwelling space for the affected families. I use the case of Chile as a laboratory to study this issue since earthquakes occur regularly. Even though changes in regulations have led to safer behavior of buildings in earthquakes, especially in urban areas, it is the built heritage that has been significantly affected. The pressure for quick reconstruction has led to a superficial understanding of heritage by offering solutions that look like the previous houses, but without considering other important aspects of their historical value, such as building techniques and human occupation. Even if we accept that the reconstruction of heritage buildings is a necessary step towards its recuperation, the role of previous records is fundamental. Although the subject of heritage intervention criteria has previously been covered by many authors, in this paper I look at the recording technologies as a way of documenting reconstruction processes to understand tradition in the context of heritage areas that are in constant adaptation due to earthquakes. Using LiDAR records and interviews of two heritage settlements in Chile, San Lorenzo de Tarapacá and Lolol, captured after the reconstruction following the 2005 earthquake and the 2010 earthquake, respectively, this paper analyzes and visualizes the inhabitation of reconstructed houses in relation to what it is considered traditional before the seismic event and how this affects the perception of built heritage. This is part of my PhD titled Reconstruction and Record, Exploring Alternatives for Heritage Areas After Earthquakes in Chile, supervised by Professors Stephen Gage and Camilo Boano at the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College London, finished in 2018. This will be the structure of the presentation. I will present the focus and key aspects of earthquakes to move into the digital record and present the tradition of adaptation idea from the cases of San Lorenzo de Tarapacá and Lolol. My focus is on the reconstruction of housing, not usually included in the heritage intervention debate because of its non-monumental condition. Humble, sustainable, and usually built with local resources by their inhabitants, Chilean heritage settlements are composed of traditional building techniques, such as adobe and quincha, adapted for the specific climatic conditions using renewable and local resources. The houses are the physical support of their inhabitants' cultural expressions, such as religious festivities. Earthquakes in Chile are a common experience for the population, as they are in many other countries in the world, such as in India. Building codes have led to the safer behavior of constructions in response to earthquakes, especially in urban areas, and have reduced significantly the number of fatalities. However, strong earthquakes continue to cause large-scale destruction of the built environment. Earthquakes have contributed to the loss of the constructive culture that characterizes heritage settlements in Chile, since the damage they produce evidence pre-existent issues, such as lack of maintenance, poor regulations, or overall neglect. This leads to accumulated damage that poses a risk for the conservation and safe inhabitation. To avoid potential damage, mitigation strategies are required, such as periodic maintenance, repair, and strengthening, but are not currently implemented at the scale of dwellings in heritage areas. To study how the reconstruction has taken place at this scale, I use accurate recording technologies such as 3D laser scanning, or also known as LiDAR. Currently, advanced recording technologies such as 3D laser scanning offer unprecedented capabilities for documenting buildings regularly as a form of digital conservation. They are currently used for heritage intervention, post-earthquake assessment, museum collections, virtual reality environments, BIM, and many other applications. A LiDAR record captures the physical environment in one of the most accurate, fast, and comprehensive ways currently possible, resulting in a digital, measurable, and colored 3D point cloud with a precision of millimeters. Once the digital model of the reality is obtained, it can offer a basis for damage assessments before and after seismic events and allows for an in-depth study of housing conditions and use. Usually, the digital model is thought as a backup to inform a physical replica in case of destruction, for example, what SIRE does. My interest is beyond that, but to think in the role of this tool and this record for the conservation of historic buildings. Instead of recording for replication, I use the record as a way to question current reconstruction processes and develop an alternative vision to enhance the underlying values of vernacular constructions, which are sustainability, economy, adaptability, and historical value. And this way of looking at heritage is what I name reconstruction. In my case studies, there are two ways of adaptations that have occurred. One is the adaptation of building techniques to a new context and the local climate. For example, in the north area, where Tarapacá is located, most buildings has light roofing because there is almost no rain. And the thermal mass of the adobe and quincha is perfect for the high temperature oscillation, which could go from near 30 degrees to 80 degrees, 30 degrees in the day to 80 degrees or less in the night. In the central south area of the country, where Lolol is located, there is constant rain, so houses have usually heavy roofing, plinths, and corridors. All of these elements protect the adobe walls from the rain and also collaborate more with the structure, so they performed better during the earthquake. And second, there has been an adaptation due to earthquakes of people experiencing firsthand what is withstanding an earthquake and what doesn't, and adapting their houses accordingly. And they have done this throughout the years. This element of adaptation, according to Jorquera, is one of the reasons why these buildings have survived in Chile, one of the highest seismic areas of the world. So let's see this in more detail in each case study. Tarapacá is located in the first region of Chile in the north area of the country, composed mainly of dwellings that have been built using traditional building techniques around the main square and church dating from the 18th century. An earthquake of 7.9 in the momentum magnitude scale affected this village in June 2005. The governmental reconstruction following the earthquake only considered the construction of new dwellings that replicated the traditional houses, but not the reinforcement or retrofit of repairable buildings. Photographic records of the village just right after the earthquake in 2005 and after the reconstruction in 2013 show clearly this issue. Bordering issues of authenticity. The new houses have only 33 square meters and were repeated as necessary within the village. So like 100 times really, and it's a very small village. They were built by external contractors using industrial materials due to the way the reconstruction funding was set up at that moment. An assistant NI scanned this settlement in 3 days in 2013, resembling a post-earthquake emergency situation, with extra days for collecting social information. The data was used for videos, as you see here, plans, sections, elevations with precision of millimeters. allowing to study seismic behavior, propose alternatives to the current reconstruction approaches at the time, and also to study how buildings were used. So probably here you see the video kind of cut it every couple of minutes because of the refreshment rate of the Zoom. But if you want to have a little bit more quality of this video, you can follow the link in green. And here in Tarapacá, we're going to focus on this house here. So this part here is where the reconstruction proposal from the government was built. And then the rest of the house was rebuilt by the owner with the resources they had at that moment. So in a very precarious way. I will detail it even more. So in this 3 laser scanning record, almost the whole village was obtained with some samples of interiors, demonstrating how 3 laser scanning can be an efficient and an affordable post-earthquake documenting tool. But more importantly, the data helped to study how houses were adapted by the users after the governmental reconstruction process. This is a plan of Tarapacá with the building interiorly scans. So some of them here, and this is the one we're going to look at now. So you can see here, this is the whole site. So this is the whole, basically this is the whole site of this house affected by the 2005 earthquake. And here's the plan and section. And in red is marked what it was built as enclosed spaces by the government 4 years later after the earthquake. So around 2009 it was built. So there was a long time between the earthquake in 2005 and the actual reconstruction that happened by the government. So in the meantime, the users just adapted what they have and lived anyway in the best way they could. And this proposal is what the government designed. And at that moment, there were 3 models of heritage houses that were designed because this is a protected area. And only this one is the one that was built the most, like around 90 times. And basically it's one big space with space over here as a kind of internal patio and a toilet at the end. And this is a reinterpretation of the intermediate space characteristic of the houses in the village, which really does not work in such a small space, but works at the level of the whole site. So here at the level of the whole site in 3 houses is marked in red. And this space is the most used space because it's a shaded space, and due to the extreme heat and lack of rain, it's the most used space to encounter with other people in the house and to access all the other spaces in the house. So instead of looking at the house, I look at the whole site and how it's being occupied. So these areas in black, all of this is where the people were living, but it was not scanned, so that's why it's in black. And this is the proposal built by the government. The first thing to say is that the person here installed a shop so they can sell things to the main facade, which is here. And they adapted this space as a sort of a praying space because they were living already here. And they closed this space given. They immediately closed it because the structure was there. And the kitchen that was here and the toilet that was there, they were not used because there were no installations in the village, so no toilets or kitchen could be used. So the sink, for example, here was moved into this intermediate space over there, and this kind of blue containers is where the water is because there's no running water. So the person installed here like a makeshift kitchen and use this intermediate space to connect all these spaces. So the reconstructed house becomes just one more space between all the rest of the spaces. And it could have been better, for future reconstruction proposals. I think the idea would be to move away from the designing of traditional houses and replicating older heritage structures in a smaller size, but to understand a wider concept in which adaptation is key and where including the inhabitant would have improved her quality of life using the same budget. Other buildings in Tarapacá that were intervened as well were adapted, that were intervened but not by the government, just by the owners, were intervened only by changing, were adapted only by changing the material. So they saw here that Adobe didn't perform well, but it's not only because of Adobe, it's because of many other reasons. So it was just rebuilt in the same way, but using timber in this way, timber panels, and here the church is the same. So they changed the material as a way to address the problem of earthquake. But in reality, with any material in seismic context, constant maintenance and adaptation is required as a way to increase resilience to earthquakes. In Lolol, which is located in the center of Chile, the experience was better since the lessons were learned from the previous earthquake in the north, and repair and retrofit of houses were possible using the government's funds, as well as the new houses. The 2010 earthquake damaged houses here, but not to a complete collapse. And a heritage reconstruction program was created for the first time. And this is where I was invited to work. And this is why I know this in first-hand experience. Lolol was the most advanced in the reconstruction processes of all the affected Chilean heritage areas because it was used as an example to show the progress of this new program. Not all the houses were possible to obtain the reconstruction subsidy, so some were in ruins and they are still in ruins. This photo is from 2015, and this is an image from the 3D scan data obtained in 2013. Here, we have a top view of the village. Again, scanned in 3 days with an assistant, and with a couple of samples of interiors. And new houses were built following a heritage design again, but also limited mainly to the budget. So in this case, many houses were repaired. So this house over here was in progress of being repaired during the 2013 scanning process. This was abandoned by the time. Nothing was done in this house in the meantime. And other houses were already repaired. So in this video, I explore this 3D point cloud as an architectural plan view from the top. It is composed of 195 scans taken over a period of 3 days. And you can see where the scanner was placed in the black circles here. And here, among the spaces that were interiorly scanned, we have this house, which was repaired by using the governmental funds, and the family was already living here back again. So in this case, Lolol now has all the houses are built in continuous facades, which is a characteristic element of these houses. And for the reconstruction, these corridors here that you see, these corridors were made continuous because they weren't like that. So in the reconstruction process, it was integrated, this kind of improvement, although it was not in the original village, it was included as a way to improve the village and include also the community and what they wanted. And it has helped to increase that sense of community. And in the case of this house here, because this house is on continuous facade, so there are like more houses this way and more houses this way, which appear in black because they were not scanned. It's very dark. So one of the improvements done while repairing the house was to include like a patio of light. So basically to increase the luminosity of all these spaces here. And that's kind of, and that was again, not in the original house, but that kind of adaptation was actually something good in this house. So in conclusion, tradition of adaptation is something desirable in the context of earthquakes. Buildings need to be constantly reinforced and repaired to be prepared for future earthquakes. And in that process, changes and adaptations are not only inevitable, but also required. And it gives the opportunity for improvements and also the opportunity to including the inhabitants in the process and the requirements they might have. And this is how we understand reconstruction as a process of adaptation, aiming to reframe tradition as adaptation in seismic context. This research in Chile is relevant to inform further application in other heritage sites, such as this research project I'm currently leading, and where we're applying a similar research method in India. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Benedict. As I said, let's hold the question for now and come back to after all the presentation completed. Thank you. Let's move on to our second presenter. Second presenter is Jazam Guna, and who is a PhD candidate in architectural history and a research assistant at the Department of Architecture at Middle East Technical University in Turkey. And her presentation, title of her presentation is Collecting the Past, Visualizing the Roman Bath in Ankara.
Thank you. I will be sharing my screen. Okay. I hope you can see.
Yes,
everything.
we can. Perfect.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present my research on the Roman bath in Ankara, where the accumulation of histories on the site framed by both rescue excavations and early Republican nationalist ideologies transported ruins from several locations in Ankara and continuously revealing previously disregarded layers is examined in terms of the visual narratives in particular, which have not only constructed a coherent visual history, but also documented other Roman baths that have since been eradicated in modern building efforts to demonstrate the role of the image within an urban archaeological site. The site of the Roman bath, located in close vicinity to one of the main urban centers of Ankara in a somewhat disreputable area, has a small sign stating that it's an open-air museum and offers visitors an abundance of remnants of the past. Organized in a manner that privileges no history above another, layers of the past lives of the ruins and the layers of their resurrection merge into one another to become frozen in time. This accommodating record, often regarded as an archaeological park, is where findings of rescue excavations throughout the capital accumulate, where previously unaccounted histories of the site itself are revealed with ideological shifts. The first encounters with the bath is based on its representations in visual media. Prior to any archaeological work on the site, the Roman bath held a visual history. Tunafort's engraving of Ankara, produced through his visit in 1701, offers a glimpse into this past when, although the state of the baths was not clear, the notion that it still stood after centuries is apparent. However, the written accounts mark 1926 as the year the state of the ruins changed after being destroyed by explosion through dynamite to make room for the Ministry of Defense. As the ruins were then used to fill up the swampland on the sides of a nearby creek, a photograph taken by Jepanion remains one of the last glimpses to this past where the walls still stood. After the building project had been called off, the site was then given to the Ministry of Education, and only after another building project took place, it became a site of study. Early Republican identity construction transforming Ankara to be an example for the nation meant large-scale construction, which inevitably led to many rescue excavations. The Roman bath was one such example, and in 1931, during the construction of the Çankırı Street, discoveries of archaeological material led to the Ministry of Education's request from the German Archaeological Institute to conduct work on the site, who then commissioned Kurt Bitter and Knut Olaf Dahlmann. Although the excavations revealed water channels and parts of the palestra, The excavators did not arrive at the conclusion that this was part of a bath complex, but rather argued for having found a marketplace. Dahlmann's argument for having found a marketplace, even after coming across components that could have been simply identified as belonging to a bath complex, was heavily influenced by a photograph sent by the Ministry of Education, which showed that the remains that they had encountered belonged to a large courtyard. This may have been the photograph taken by Gefarno. In comparing the status of the found object to the photograph, Dahlmann's interpretation, focusing heavily on the photograph, speaks volumes on the authority of the image. Here, I would like to include a quote by Michael Schenks from Photography and Archaeology stating, quote, "Even when photographs are acknowledged as artifacts, they may also take on something of the status of the found objects, harnessing the magic of the real." The agency given to the photograph is also a factor in Dahlmann's own contribution to the site. Unlike other archaeologists working on the site in the future who often conclude their marks with hopes for future excavations, Dahlmann instead praised their role played in the visual history of the bath, stating, quote, "Most of the ruins will abandon their places as a necessity of modern transportation and will only continue their lives in the photographs we take." At a time when such ambitious building projects constructed Ankara as the new capital representing the young nation, the findings of a rescue excavation conducted to give way to building one of the main streets of the urban center is without hesitation regarded to only live within the image rather than actively shape the future of the site. For Dahlmann, the photographs sent during the excavations through which the spaces are inaccurately identified and the images they capture in which the ruins continue their lives both conjure reality, and the photographs clearly amount to more than mere documentations of the site or the excavation process, but hold a meaning of their own, one that has the potential to narrate more than what was seen. Although only a small portion of the bath was uncovered during this rescue excavation, and the site today is the Çankırı Street used to approach the open-air museum, it did influence the future accumulations of archaeological finds on the site. As the findings of a Byzantine tomb were transported to the available site nearby where the Roman bath would later be uncovered, the area was designated as a small architectural museum right next to the modern road to animate the memories of the past, even before the bath itself had been excavated and identified. This defined the site through its archaeological properties, and the constructed perception of it initiated the accumulation of histories on the site. The Byzantine tomb findings, product of another rescue excavation discovered during the construction of the train station building in the 1930s, were placed and displaced within its borders. Further unearthing efforts were utilized as tools for representing the nation. Following the work of Dahlmann, an excavation led by Remzi Oğuz Irk in 1937 as part of a larger archaeological project covering Ankara was conducted on the south corner of what was regarded as a tumulus, and it revealed Phrygian findings within the site. This led to the understanding of the site as holding several layers of past civilizations and triggered further research. In 1938, in an effort to find Hittite layers not previously encountered in Ankara, students of archaeology of the Faculty of Letters conducted excavations under the directory of the Turkish Historical Society and Monuments and Museums. The archaeological excavations were utilized in order to trace the origins of the secular republic to prehistoric Anatolian civilizations and present Hittite findings as powerful symbols for early republican nationalism. As a past older than the Ottoman, which the ideology was trying to distance itself from, and also a past older than Greek and Roman, denoted as the origins of European civilizations, the Hittite was specifically Anatolian, hence particularly sought after. But as you can see from the plan, what was revealed was a completely different story. But in this quest for Hittite findings, the site revealed Phrygian, Roman, Byzantine, Seljuk, and Ottoman findings. In line with the early Republican ideology, which not only tried to establish its roots through a history older than the Ottoman, but also tried to promote its strong ties with Europe through Greek and Roman findings, the Phrygian layers were found vulgar, whereas the Roman layer was found proper. And the Hellenistic layer was noted absent, whereas the Seljuk and Ottoman layers encountered were not even commented upon. Although their focus privileged certain histories among these findings, the archaeologists intended to produce a section drawing that would present every cultural layer, which was in line with the early Republican archaeological efforts to include all cultural heritage. Interestingly, the sondage excavation to produce this section drawing led to the unexpected discovery of the hypocaust, thus identifying the space to be a bath, one of the largest in the world according to Dolunay. After their excavations revealing a majority of the bath complex, Dolunay proudly stated that with this, Ankara has gained a monument containing a significant historical as well as touristic importance. What is lost in this translation is that Dolunay regards having unearthed and defined such a monumental structure to be an asset earned as well as gained. A reflection on the selection of the word reveals a mindset that considers Ankara to always hold the right to it within its many layers, but an effort had to be shown to actually claim it. There is also an emphasis on the continuity of the identity of the city, reflected in the emphasis of the findings having been made by a material defined by Dolunay as a completely local Ankara stone. This notion of historical continuity in line with nationalist approaches of the time with regards to Ankara is also traced within the narrative of Bosch in his paper titled The Ancient Bath Museum in Ankara, narrates this as, quote, any person who has wandered through the asphalt streets, parks, modern houses, and stupendous official buildings, and placed within oneself the unique sight from the top of the castle, cannot help to wonder the age of the city and the reason for its prominence in every era. This juxtaposition, end quote, this juxtaposition of the old and the new extends even to Bosch regarding Eugenius, who is often highlighted as a person responsible for the construction of the bath, to be a memur in Turkish government official, which further exemplifies the discourse of the time being reflected upon the past in a way that claims it as one's own. Another point to be made when looking back to Dolunay's statement with regard to the bath is the emphasis on its touristic importance. In Ernest Mambri's Tourist Guide for Ankara, published in 1934, the bath is mentioned only in passing, mostly because whether it was a bath or not had still not been ascertained. Hence, it may be said that with the efforts of Dolunay, Ankara had finally earned and gained the right to call the Roman bath its own and present it to others. After having unearthed the majority of the Roman bath complex, a new chapter of its representation began, one that of data visualization in a way that communicates the past. An interest on the imagination of what it once was emerges. Mahmut Akok, who was already acquainted with the site as he was the head of operation to transport the Byzantine tomb findings of the 1930s to the site, led several excavations on the site throughout the 1940s. Unlike Dolunay's work on the site, those conducted by Akok were rescue excavations where the excavator seized opportunities and waited for building constructions in suspicious locations to unearth a past of a city that was still in the process of being rebuilt in a large scale. Working on the site with Dolunay in the early 1940s, Akok's own excavations led him to develop a clear idea of the bath complex. The 1944 excavations to the idea that the bath was intended to be symmetrical, however left unfinished, the 46 excavations revealing a small bath, and the 47 excavations revealing a private bath. Even though Akok argued for a symmetrical plan for the large bath complex, the excavations conducted in 1944, where this was expected to be located, revealed a completely different layout, with no reference on the site to substantiate this idea. The assumption was made that the bath must have been left unfinished. The triumph of Akok's imagination over the reality of the space was later reflected in his visual productions. It may be argued that in both his justification for lack of a symmetrical plan and the spaces brought to life in his drawings, Akok's acquired knowledge of Roman baths, such as the Caracalla baths in Rome, dictated the way he imagined them to be. These assumptions on what the bath must have looked like led to the production of visuals far surpassing the spaces uncovered by excavations. Although his archaeological work did not exclusively focus on the site of the Roman bath that was worked on extensively by Dolunay, his visual productions of the existing as well as the newly found information surpassed any detailed text published adjacent to it. Akok cautiously presented his drawings to the scholarly audience, saying, "We try to express what would have been lengthy to do so in words. But when these visuals are compared with the textual ones published together, or the photographs he includes, what becomes apparent is that it would not only have been lengthy to do so, but perhaps impossible, as a written production was predominantly information-based with detailed numeric identifiers, and photographs were taken merely to document and could not have been presented in a manner that evokes the imagination in a way that Akok's drawings managed to. Apart from their visual narratives, Akok's drawings also recorded a moment in time that would have been lost otherwise. The small bath Akok represents in his drawings has since been eradicated, unknown when or by whom, even though the prison meant to be built on the site has been called off. The bath discovered in the site of today's Ulus Business Center was also only recorded in his drawings from 1956 and was later erased from the urban fabric. Interestingly, after Akok's work, perhaps too removed from the reality of the space, in a way constructing an alternative history, the site that has been worked on so extensively is deserted for nearly 50 years and remains an open-air artifact storage. This lack of attention towards the site could also be explained with Dana Arnold's statements, quote, "The seductive power of a visual as the illusion of total knowledge of what is being represented or described," end quote. And in these terms, the illusion of having gained all knowledge of and from the site might explain its neglect, and after being brought to life from Earth, its journey of returning back to it. After rescuing, utilizing, and representing the past, a new chapter began of questioning it, while also focusing on the future of the site itself. After 1995 and throughout the early 2000s, extensive work carried out in the site to restore the ruins and present them in a visitor-friendly manner takes center stage for the site program of the Roman bath conducted by Anatolian Civilizations Museum. On the other hand, the academic production, no longer in the domain of those conducting the excavations, shifts to archaeologists revisiting the historiography of Roman Ankara to question claims made and argue whether the tentative dating of the bath to Caracalla was accurate. An important reason behind the dating of the bath construction of the bath to the Caracalla being the coins found on the site, the likeness of the coins merely being in circulation during the lifespan of the bath is argued. It is also suggested that the rule of Caracalla marked Ankara's most prolific minting period, which may explain the abundance of coinage in circulation. Inscriptions mentioning the visit of Caracalla are also taken into critical reevaluation, as such ambitious building projects for the arrival of the emperor could have been met with disappointment, as he might not have shown up. Today, as the fragmentary ruins transported from several locations of Ankara constitute the Roman Bath Open Air Museum, the site remains rich with layers of the past. An example of these is a Roman tomb found in Balgat, a residential area in Ankara, in 1998 and transported to the site for exhibition. But this accumulation of ruins, together with the lack of adequate documentation and organization, makes the task of future research as well as current visits difficult to curate. The unaccounted or previously disregarded histories of the site became visible as Turkish historiography began to acknowledge the Ottoman past, and the Ottoman tombs recorded in 2001 make the Roman Bath Open Air Museum even more open to possibilities of re-examination. Earlier archaeological findings, such as the Byzantine tomb, which was transported to the site in 1930 and have been part of the site even before the Roman bath was uncovered, become hidden within the narrative of the site. The site cut off from the urban fabric and the remains of the bath separated from the rest of the ruins to the extent where it's surrounded by a barrier so as not to allow access, make both time capsules within the urban context. As efforts to make the space attract more visitors continue, the visual production of Akok still sets the basis for 3D reconstructions of virtual reality projects. The history of the resurrection of the bath finds new light in a more enhanced visual representation, further removed from the reality of the space. As Dalman hoped to have the bath continue its life in the photographs they took, and Akok wanted to bring the bath back to life in his restitution drawings, a visual history of the site could perhaps be regarded as having a much more coherent narrative to it than a textual one or what the site itself has to offer. A glance from within the site offers a brief view to the Ankara castle, right here, What stands between the site and the castle is the remnants of the modern building efforts, constituting a wall of their own, and the squatter housing on the slopes of the castle hill as the ruins of a far closer history of the mass migration to the city. The castle walls seen from the site, where ruins similar to those preserved within the site are embedded within its walls as spolia, are testaments of the integration or perhaps appropriation of the past. As contemporary building projects on an urban scale aim to capitalize on the historical district, remains of privileged histories, such as the Hacı Bayram Mosque built in the Ottoman period, are emphasized where the Acropolis Hill, which it is built upon, where it coexists with the Temple of Augustus, is irreversibly damaged in order to construct underground parking and extend the mosque. As these building efforts in the district inevitably privilege a past in line with contemporary ideology, sometimes at the expense of another, the open-air museum not only brings together several layers of the past, but also stands as a testament reflecting the ideologies unearthing them. The images with a life of their own, often disregarded whilst making statements on the inadequacy of a history written of Ankara, state that perhaps the history is still to be written, but the images themselves will forever be embedded within it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gizem. And let's again hold the question and move on to the next presentation. And our final presentation is from, let me just get the information here. Yeah, so the final presentation is from Dr. Namain Ali Hani Hassan, and she is an assistant professor in the Department of Architectural Engineering and Environmental at the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, Maritime Transport in Egypt. And her presentation is on building information modeling as a virtual tool in the sustainable retrofitting of heritage buildings in Egypt. Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Nermina Alihani. I'm an assistant professor at the Arab Academy for Science, Technology, and Maritime at Alexandria, Egypt. The research paper that I will present today is titled with The Role Played by Heritage Building Information Modeling as a Virtual Tool in the Application of Sustainable Retrofitting of Heritage Buildings in Egypt. Excuse my voice, as I just recovered from COVID. I will start by giving an introduction about the research topic. Heritage buildings play an important role in shaping societies as they reflect the city's identities. Moreover, the preservation through sustainable retrofits is an opportunity to reuse them while preserving them. Therefore, the application of heritage building information modeling as a new paradigm is used as a virtual tool to provide a comprehensive set of data and information, particularly focusing on the heritage buildings restoration. The research aims to integrate heritage building information modeling tools in the application of sustainable retrofits through a proposed conservation theoretical framework in Egypt. The research problem: on one hand, heritage buildings are the landmarks of Egyptian cities, heritage quarters and streets in the downtown centers, which gives uniqueness to the cities. They are living symbols of Egypt's rich cultural heritage as they reflect the society's identity. On the other hand, some heritage buildings suffer from degradation problems, despite that they can be reused to preserve them for future generations. However, there are increasing interest and arguments for protecting heritage buildings. Many heritage buildings remain under the threat of degradation and demolishment because of the limited resources that are devoted to their long-term protection in Egypt. Therefore, new and innovative strategies and tools are required for the protection of these valuable assets through sustainable retrofitting of heritage buildings, which gives opportunity for the conservation through sustainable retrofits that aims to improve the energy efficiency, building performance optimization, increasing tenant satisfaction, and the economic return while preserving the heritage values for heritage buildings. The research consists of two parts. The first part presents a theoretical discourse that starts with defining the problem and presenting a review and relevant practices about heritage buildings and heritage building information modeling and sustainable retrofitting. While the second part is analytical study for successful examples for a heritage building information modeling implementation. The two selected heritage buildings are one from the Egyptian context and the other one from European context. The Egyptian example was chosen from one of the most significant cities that are culturally rich in Egypt, which is the city of Alexandria. The selected example from Alexandria is Basili Basha Villa, which has encountered a retrofit and reused to be the National Museum of Alexandria. The other selected example is from European context. In order to provide a different perspective of retrofit, it is Villa Heike in Berlin, Germany, which dates back to the same period of Basili Basha Villa. The research proceeds with the literature review about heritage buildings. Starting with the importance of heritage buildings, there are 5 types of the built heritage, which are inductive value, historical value, decorative value, comparative value, communal value. The classification of heritage buildings in Egypt, they are classified into 3 levels. Level A, the adjustments permitted inside and remotely are extremely restrictive. Level B, the internal adjustments are permitted with greater adaptability. Level C is the greatest adaptability is permitted. The building can be demolished and rebuilt. However, the external elevations must be kept with the same design. The threats facing the heritage buildings in Egypt, unfortunately, the city of Alexandria in Egypt experienced fast demolishment of significant old villas. Since 2011 revolution, the rate of destruction has accelerated and listed villas were targeted and even removed from the heritage list by the direct order from the Prime Minister. Many more were damaged and destroyed without ever being studied or documented, unfortunately taking with them a significant slice of the modern Egyptian history. The weakening of the built heritage in the Egyptian setting is due to the low keep-up, powerless administration, and shortcoming in the authorization laws and approaches are a portion of this degradation reason. Also, the impact of time and weather conditions with low support can make their conditions more worse. During the 1960s, the Egyptian government stopped a system called the Waqf. With this system, a few people used to give buildings where its income is utilized for altruistic purposes, and the building cannot be sold, leased, or inherited. Another significant explanation behind the quick crumbling of the built heritage in Egypt is the lack of the public awareness with the value of these buildings and the wide potential advantages these buildings could give. Therefore, the approach of sustainable retrofitting for heritage buildings is recommended in Egypt. Differentiation between the terms is vital in order to have a clear understanding of the term sustainable retrofit. Especially the approach is to update and reuse buildings is demonstrated by the usage of numerous titles such as retrofit, refurbishment, restoration, conservation. The research will focus on the sustainable retrofits. The sustainable retrofit for heritage buildings has various positive impacts on their environmental performance, their social sustainability, and their economic value. It has different branches like the energy, structure, aesthetic, as shown in figure 01. It requires good design for building in addition to careful planning that considers its surrounding environment, sustainable design principles that encourage maximum reuse of existing building components, restoration of the passive aspects of the original design, and preservation of the microclimate created by the heritage plantings and the site's usage should also be included in the sustainable retrofit of heritage buildings. In addition, the sustainable retrofit extends the lifespan of the building and adds value to the building and reduces the carbon footprint while preserving its cultural heritage values as shown in figure 02. The stages for sustainable retrofitting for heritage buildings consists of 5 stages. The first stage is the project setup and pre-retrofit survey. The retrofit team needs to first determine the scope of work and set the project targets. Second stage is setting and preparing the goals and objectives based on the analysis by the design team. Third stage is the identification and the available retrofit options through the usage of appropriate energy models, economic analysis tools, and risk assessment methods. Stage 4 is the site implementation and commissioning. The previously selected retrofit measures are implemented on site. Stage 5 is the validation and verification of the energy savings using computer devices. Stage 6 is the performance assessment that involves the risks and performance assessments to reinforce the financial analysis and the evaluation of the sustainable property investment. Heritage building modeling became a notable tool that aids in the conservation of heritage buildings as a plug-in in the BIM. Heritage building modeling is defined as a system for modeling heritage structures from laser scanning and photogrammetric data. The process of implementing HBMI generally involves a reverse engineering solution whereby parametric objects depicting architectural elements are mapped into laser scan and photogrammetric survey data. This process includes a number of stages in order to achieve the final product. The advantages of using the benefits of generating heritage buildings in 3D. There are benefits for using the 3D, which are remote reviewing of the building exterior and interior, allow study with new structures in the environment context, possibility to survey different periods of time, better estimation of the structure using images, allow appreciation of renovations and adaptation prior to committing to a strategy and full construction. And last but not least, most people can understand the 3D building more than the 2D flat drawing. A heritage building information modeling approaches pursues the modeling and documentation of architecture elements according to artistic, historical, and constructive typologies. In addition to the special library of the BIM that was specially designed to preserve and manage the cultural heritage within the general framework of the smart heritage. It consists of 3 steps, which is the knowledge and information collection, filtering, and 3D parametric modeling. The research proceeds with the analytical study through the analysis of 2 successful examples for the application of sustainable retrofit in the heritage buildings. The following section provides example for retrofit of 2 heritage buildings. Those 2 selected heritage buildings are one from the Egyptian context and the other one from the European context, as mentioned earlier. The Egyptian example was chosen from one of the most significant cities that are culturally rich in Egypt, which is Alexandria. Unfortunately, Alexandria has suffered a rapid loss of its built heritage since 2011 revolution. This selected example is from Alexandria, is Basili Basha, which has encountered a retrofit and a reuse of the National Museum of Alexandria. It's a successful example that shows the wide potentials of retrofit, which can provide for the conservation of the built heritage. The second example is selected from a European context in order to provide a different perspective for the retrofit. It's Villa Heike in Berlin, Germany, which dates back to the same period of Basili Basha Villa. The selected examples were analyzed relatively to the discussed literature review about heritage values and principles of retrofit. The various values these buildings provide for the society are determined, as well as the goals of the reuse address these values. The analysis include comparison between the reuse goals as well as the elements that were added to meet these goals. The analysis provides an illustrative example of how the addition of new elements can add to the heritage preservation values. The first example is from Alexandria. As I mentioned before, it suffered from continuous loss of its built heritage since the 2011 revolution. Therefore, the protection of the built heritage requires more attention through the reuse of the old villas in Alexandria, as the National Museum is a means of the built heritage production. The villa was previously owned by Saad Basha and then owned by the United States government to be used as their consulate. Then the Egyptian Minister of Culture bought this building in order to reuse it as a national museum for Alexandria. The reuse plan ensures the importance of keeping architectural features of the villa regarding both the external and internal elevations and the interior spaces, in addition to new features that were required were added. This is a summary for all the analysis of this example. This table summarizes this example. We'll move on to the second example, which is Villa Heike in Berlin, Germany. Villa Heike is a listed building built in 1910 as a multifunctional building with a reinforced concrete skeleton. Unfortunately, the villa was abandoned for 20 years. Then it was reused. The concept for the project had been laid out in advance by the architects to serve as an affordable space in a building owner setup for artists and creative businesses. The concept was tailor-made for this building that made it possible to keep the historic fabric mostly unchanged. The post-war additions were removed, lost elements were carefully added. As a witness to history, Villa Heike is meant not to hide its scars. Intentionally, traces of all periods are kept visible. Contemporary additions and reconstructed elements are carried out in a good manner. Table 2 summarizes the analysis for this example. Through the analysis of these two examples, there was a concluded framework. The concluded theoretical framework to be implemented in Egypt. It consists of 5 main stages, which are the initial visioning, planning design. Stage 3 is the evaluation of executed scenarios. Stage 4 is the implementation, and stage 5 is the assessment. This is the details for the concluded framework. Due to the time of the presentation, I won't be discussing every stage in detail. The research concludes with the following. It became evident that applying both heritage building information modeling and sustainable retrofit on the heritage buildings in Egypt continues to be a limited practice that faces numerous challenges. A number of many challenges include the unavailability of equipment, restricted ability of professionals, and funding and financial related challenges. The aim was to incorporate various sides of conservation in one framework that relies on a scientific background. This framework requires further evaluation and feedback from the operational perspective authorities in Egypt. Spreading public awareness for the value of the built heritage, contrary to common belief that built heritage does not contradict the providing of owners with economic benefits. The building can, from now on, be used for various purposes without demolishment or the need for rebuilding. The primary determining factor in selecting acceptable risk for evaluation standards and for selecting the minimum performance objective for retrofit public policy is the cost of applying both heritage building information modeling tools and sustainable retrofit processes on the heritage buildings. The research advocates the creation of more detailed study regarding the short-term benefits contrasted with the long-term benefits and the return on investment from applying both the heritage building information modeling and sustainable retrofit on heritage buildings in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan. Okay, so that's the end of our 3 presentations, and they are very different, all very interesting. And now we're open to question and answer sessions. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can either just raise your hand and we will call you to ask your question, or alternatively, you can type your question in the chat window and we will pick them up and ask the presenters. And if you direct your question to a particular presenter, please do so. Or alternatively, if you apply to all 3, that is also fine. Okay, so it's time to think of your questions. While you are thinking, maybe if I start by asking, maybe I'll start with Dr. Hassan. You mentioned you use the heritage BIM system. Is that an existing commercial software, or is it a system that you developed or your team developed?
Oh, I did not. Is this question for me, right?
Yes, question for you.
Oh,
you mentioned in your program, obviously you look at the, or you use the heritage building information modeling system.
Implementation for the BIM in the application of sustainable retrofits in Egypt. Unfortunately, it's not yet implemented, and it needs a lot of funding, and it needs a lot of professional work. So it's a theoretical framework for encouraging researchers to start using the BIM to encourage the heritage building preservation instead of demolishment.
Okay, so at the moment you're still at the just develop the framework stage, haven't developed the detailed tools. Okay,
Yes.
the frame you're proposing, use the beam. Obviously, you also mentioned the conceptual data modeling of the beam is the industry foundation classes, the IFCs, and that is obviously a generic data model, not specific to heritage buildings. A generic model just for all buildings, like they describe the concept like windows, doors, walls, etc., etc. All very generic. When you apply it to heritage buildings, do you think you need to expand that model to make it more specific? For instance, are there any kind of a component in heritage buildings are more specific that currently not included in the BIM model?
Maybe some of the architectural area that is not already included in the model, or maybe part of the heritage building it's already demolished or degraded, so they don't know how the architecture character is looking, and they will try to implement it.
Another challenge, obviously, I know there's a lot of research people proposing using building information modeling in existing buildings. And one of the tasks is obviously how you do the survey and to build the BIM model. And you mentioned using 3D scanning. Obviously, yeah, but obviously 3D scanning does not create the BIM model. It just creates a point clouds, isn't it? Yes. And how will you create the model or translate the point cloud, or basically images or photographs? How do you translate that into a BIM model? And that is a task. I don't know how you're proposing achieving that.
And that's why I mentioned in the conclusions that this is just a theoretical framework that needs to be approved from the authorities in Egypt, and it needs more to be implemented. It has like challenges, like for example, as you said, the implementation of the model. That's why I said it's still a theoretical one, and it needs to be implemented after the approval from the Egyptian authorities, and facing a lot of challenges.
It's interesting. You kind of look at this heritage building preservation issue from a sustainability point of view. Is that a big challenge? Is that a lot of historical houses currently need to be upgraded from energy or from a sustainability point of view in Egypt? Is that a big task that is required?
It's a very big challenge, because there is two sides of the story, which is the owner of the heritage building. He doesn't know the value of it, and he needs to demolish it in any way, so that this land could be sold, and instead skyscrapers are coming, because the heritage building is no more bringing revenue or financial funds for the owner. So sustainable retrofits and the reuse of the building to another use is another method, so that the building is not being demolished, and to encourage the owners of the heritage buildings to rent them and to reuse them, so that more financial revenue is going to them.
Okay,
Actually,
thank you.
Since the revolution in 2011 in Egypt, and the heritage buildings are facing degradation and demolishment on purpose, so that they get demolished and new skyscrapers are coming instead.
Oh, okay. So that is obviously okay. So that's the issue is not a technical issue. So is a kind of it's like a policy, government policy, national policy.
That's why the paper aims to theoretical framework to encourage the tenants and the government and all the policymakers to start implementing sustainable retrofits and reuse of heritage buildings instead of their demolishment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Let me see. I don't know how I can see if people, as I said, if you have any question, you can raise your hand. I'm not sure how I see it when you people.
Nermeen, can you hear me? This is Mark Gillum.
Oh, yes, yes, I can hear you. Come on in. Yeah.
No, yes,
Yeah.
I can hear.
Well, thanks for the great presentations and really interesting to see how, especially in terms of heritage preservation in Egypt, the
Thank you.
kind of issues that you're struggling with. As you know, here in the United States, we often call it demolition by neglect, where the property owners or whoever the proponent is just ignores the building and lets it deteriorate. I'm curious kind of how property owners can be engaged in Egypt. Are there different economic incentives, or are there processes of listing historic buildings like we would have the National Historic Register, things like that? But what kind of tools and I would say processes could be leveraged that might work better there than perhaps in the United States?
Unfortunately, since 2011, and the laws are being changed, and there is people are not following the rules. So some of the listed buildings are getting out of the list. Therefore, their owners could make for them demolishment, and they make in the building so that the building is wet and being more in bad conditions so that it can be demolished. Plus, as I mentioned, in 1960 there was a system for the heritage buildings, and the government stopped. It's called the WAF system, and the government stopped this system for several reasons. So since then, there is a lot of manipulation in the heritage listing of the heritage buildings.
Mm-hmm. And when they are demolished, we would have the Historic Architecture Building Survey or the Historic Architecture Record, where we would come in and model these and do the virtual reality of these buildings.
This is what I said, that some buildings are even demolished before having any architecture record for them. And that's why we are missing a part of our history.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I want to encourage people to reuse the buildings and to retrofit them, so that they have financial revenue, and we save the history for our future generations.
One last question, kind of a follow-up. You had, in your stages of your findings, you had stage 1 was initiation, and it talked about the visioning for the conservation project. What are some of the best examples you've seen where that's worked? Who has been involved and how have they been engaged in visioning in your stage 1?
I've seen the National Museum of Alexandria. It was already an abandoned villa, and then they took it as the consulate for the American embassy, and then after the American embassy, it was used as a national museum for Alexandria and reused. Also, there is an example for in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, and there was an example. It's in the paper. There was a part for all the examples I used, or they were like a vision for me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the role of the public in this visioning process, or is there much of a role for the public in this?
Public participation. It's not in the visioning. The visioning is just for the architects or for the people that are involved in the project. Actually, public participation is not really involved in Egypt. That's why I said in one of the findings that we need more public awareness, and public awareness will lead consequently to public participation.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do I know that in the United States, when you are doing a project, especially if it's a national project, people would vote and say, okay, we want it, we need it. In Egypt here, we don't do this.
Well, thanks. It was a very good paper.
And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, there's one question to Gizem. How do you think the changing political and ideological agenda have impacted the destruction of Roman heritage in Turkey? what is the perception of using virtual reconstruction as the critical to the long-term preservation of that history?
Well, in terms of like political factors, the example that I gave with the Augustus Temple, which is right next to this mosque that was built in the Ottoman period, while we were trying to extend the mosque and make it more visitor friendly, there was a complete disregard for the Temple of Augustus. They even placed pools there, and I'm sure you all know how humidity works with ancient heritage. And they took down so many layers of the Acropolis Hill to build things like underground parking and invite more people into this specifically selected part of history, which is the mosque, that the Augustus Temple, and it is an interesting artifact because it's where the Resquesta of Augustus was placed. And even in Rome, there's a copy of the one that is placed in Ankara, but now it is slowly decaying. And in terms of like political shifts, Turkey has this tendency where each political viewpoint or ideology tends to disregard what was done before them. So in this sort of rewriting of history continuously before the 2000s, which you probably know of Turkey right now, Turkey was a completely secular and very nationalistic viewpoint, which tried to ignore the Ottoman past, ignore the Seljuk past, and even things like the Seljuk tombs that were placed in the Parestra, in the bath pool itself, were just taken out during excavations and completely disregarded. So now they're trying to remember these heritages, but it's only for the past 20 years with this political party shift. In terms of like documenting virtually all these heritages, there is, of course, this fact that every archaeological project tends to select a layer which they will freeze the site in, because most sites in Turkey are so layered, and they will stop the excavation at one point and present that. So like a Roman site could have Hellenistic or classical remains, but they don't go down that much. So in terms of digital reconstructions, there is the added benefit of revealing what is under that. But there's also the fact that when you digitally record something, it makes it more perishable. So the 3D real space could perish more easily because it is in the records. So it is something that future generations could go back and look at without having the actual space. And always there's, in terms of the archaeological ancient archaeology in Turkey, there's, I'm sure you all know how many artifacts have left the country. So during the Ottoman period, during the early Republic, British, German archaeological institutes have taken so many of these valued artifacts, such as the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. There's this sense that if we bring in this artificial VR projects into these sites, people then visiting the site could actually see these remains, even though they've left. So there's this idea that virtual reality projects in Turkey could bring more tourists to the site, not even foreign tourists, local tourists, because they don't see the artifacts in their location. So I think it's so nuanced and it's so layered that whether it's a good idea or not, I think it depends on the ambitions of that specific project.
I thought your presentation it's perfectly reviewed the complexity of archaeology, and as you said, I mean, for a lot of these heritage sites, they have so many layers, and the different period and different people will just focus on a particular aspect or particular layer that's consistent with their belief or their political agenda. But do you think with the kind of a virtual technology or digital technology, would it make it easier, at least, to kind of to produce a more accurate record of covering all the layers, and the different people can still have different interpretations, but at least give a accurate record of all the history. Do you think that's that, or the virtual technology make it easier at least?
Well, the virtual technology usually utilized here in Turkey is in terms of catering to the audience, which is not architecturally or archaeologically that informed, and just tourists and just someone who's trying to get a sense of the place. So those projects tend to add so much of what is not certain. So like things like color or not found columns or light. And even in Cook's drawings, I always admire how he put people taking bath, taking steps, all these ideas of imagining what the space was or must have looked like. But with that comes new virtual reality projects, not utilizing what is known, what is exactly found on that space, but what Akok drew of the spaces. So it's very interesting that the virtual reality projects is not scanning the site. It's not taking measurements. It's not looking at the archaeological records, but it's utilizing, imagined drawings of the spaces. So with that, in Turkey, we have so many museums having all these new technologies showing what the space must have looked like. But if you are, acquainted with that period or that, historical representation, you tend to see, oh, okay, this is not actually correct. And in terms of showing every single layer, it's so much more complicated because if we're like modeling cities didn't change from Hellenistic to Roman in a breeze. They didn't become completely different spatial organizations, but they changed part by part, bit by bit, and reflecting those changes in so much detail is impossible probably. And when you're, producing a visual that is only dependent on what is known, what is fact, that doesn't really, interest the tourists. That doesn't really interest those visiting the sites.
Yeah. Okay. I saw Gamal has his hand up. Are you still there, Gamal?
Yes, I'm still here. Thanks a lot for the comprehensive answer. I'm try to perhaps pick on the point about having this virtual virtual record of the laser scanning of those sites as a historic record in themselves. Because when you do this kind of digital records, similar to what happened in Notre Dame Cathedral, for example, became references in the future when the eras change, when things happen later, and you need to really to either record it or preserve it or even to reconstruct it in virtual on real life. And I think this is what I will bring me to Bernadette's work on the frequently destroyed heritage of Chile, which is actually you record that heritage at that moment in time, yet that heritage is vulnerable to disappear at some point. So sometimes it's natural, sometimes political, sometimes ideological. So to have a record of those historic buildings or structures at some point in time in itself is a very valuable process, because you've got already the fact, the record, and we cannot really eliminate the impact of politics, conflicts, or wars, or natural disasters, of eliminating that heritage at some point, but at least having that record as clear as and factual as you mentioned, this might act indirectly as a counter to the ideological interest in destroying them in the first place. Thanks, Ming. Sorry for interruption.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's okay. Do you want anybody to answer that, or you just made the comment? It's fine.
Just it was a comment and then reflecting on how valuable this could be from in the Turkish context, but also if Bernadette has interest also to reflect on that importance of this method. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We also have a question in the chat. I think the question maybe Osama. Do you want to ask your question? I don't quite get your, I think you asked about the tourism aspect. I don't know whether your question is about the impact of tourism the damaging impact of tourism on heritage or the positive one?
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm very thankful to have been granted to ask this question for the very privileged researchers on the platform. Firstly, all of your presentations are truly enlightening. I would like to ask both Dr. Nermeen and Dr. Gizem, and of course, Dr. Bernadette would be more than welcome to put her input into this. So there is this touristic project right here in Alexandria, Egypt, where a very large plot of land has a heritage villa right in the middle of it. It's called Aziza Fahmi. I'm sure Dr. Nermeen is well aware of this heritage villa. Is now imperiled to lose a lot of its heritage value because it is now planned to have a touristic hotel be built among the the confines of the lot that has the heritage villa. And so this is similar to the example that Dr. Gazem was calling about how there was a pool, I think, or a mosque that was extended on a heritage or an pre-existing heritage site. And so I think this really joins hands in a lot of the researchers' areas. And so I would just want to receive like any kind of insight from all of you, if I would be so lucky, on how this touristic venture would, very much add to the destruction of a huge heritage value or huge chunk, at least, of the heritage value, both literally and metaphorically. Thank you.
Could I start?
Yes, please.
Yes. I live in Alexandria, and the Villa Aziz Fahmi was once, it's a heritage building. It's a listed one, and it is it's located in one of the prime locations in Alexandria on the waterfront. It's already been owned now by the government, and they are trying to make in it a project, which is a hotel, as mentioned earlier. I'm totally against the hotel. I would rather see this villa to be reused as a museum, as a gallery, something that people could use it, but in terms of cultural way, not touristic way. This is my point of view. And I think it should be, till now, it's not, this project is not done, but I think it would take time to do this project. And I hope, I'm crossing my fingers, that this project won't be done.
Thank you.
This is my point of view. I hope now I could answer.
Okay, Jinem, do you have anything to add on that point?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the Alexandrian example, but in terms of this district where all these Roman heritage in Ankara lie, there was this facelift in 2000s where they tried to cover all the facades of the deteriorating buildings with pleasant facades, which is very much what any historical district in Turkey receives, like a white facade with dark wood beams. And it's sort of this identity of old Turkey that they're trying to reproduce continuously. And it began like that. But to make the whole place a tourist attraction, they added things like, the little shops, coffee places, a few museums. But in terms of like inviting tourists into this location, the whole future of this historical district of Ankara was erased just to make it sort of like a theme park where tourists can come, eat, buy stuff, and especially in Ramadan, where a lot of locals come there after they break their fast. There are all these small tables where they are selling all these plastic Tupperwares or small toys for children, and then you go in and the whole identity of the historical district is lost just to capitalize. So it starts with this small change of the facade. It becomes this whole project where whole neighbors are demolished and rebuilt
to make it look like it's an old district. So I think, inviting tourists in, whether it's locals, tourists from the city or from abroad, from other cities, it sort of becomes this avalanche where the whole identity is lost just to cater to consumer needs and to capitalize on the history, which is then completely lost.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Let me move on to have a question for ask Benedict a question. And I'm quite interested in what you presented of using the 3D scanning technology in the restoration after the earthquakes. But it seems to me it's quite kind of intensive in terms of the involvement of the researchers, do all the scanning, and multiple times it appears when you need the different time frame. How can you upscale that technology or that methods to other applications in other situations? What do other people need to follow your methods, or what do they need to do to apply your methodology?
Hi, Ming. Thank you very much for the question. Well, there are several layers of that question, really. One is institutional, in terms of what an earthquake happens. There is an institution, a heritage institution of the country, that will go and check the level of damage produced by the earthquake in historical areas and historical buildings, and will create a sort of cadastre of damage. So then actions can be taken. When that happens, it's a very visual work, just photographs. And then what happens is, most of the times you have indiscriminate demolition, which is very similar to what the other presenters were showing, especially the case of Egypt, where the earthquake becomes the opportunity to kind of get rid of the heritage for some people, because of the pressure of the market. Therefore, it's pretty much needed a strategy that could record as much as possible in little time. So then several different possibilities could be done afterwards. So 3D scanning is one of those. But photogrammetry could also be one of the techniques used. But in order to be implemented at such level, you will need something that we are implementing now in India, and trying to implement in India. It's a partnership with a local university, because normally these damage assessments are done through a university, like through volunteer work of architectural students. And therefore, you have the technical knowledge through the architectural students, and then you have the institutional involvement that probably would not have the money or resources to do it. So if you do a partnership between them, this could be implemented at a more larger level, which is what we're trying to do now through a training project in India. It has worked very good, but I think that's kind of the innovative way of how to do it in this context.
So the aim of your approach or methodology, so what is the main aim? Is the main aim to make the restoration process more effective, or to be carried out more widespread? Or because I guess, I mean, prior to adopt any of the technology, people in these kind of areas where they tend to have the earthquake disasters, they would just go through this process again and again. And so with the intervention of your system, your methodology, what impact your methods make?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing is, over the years, no intervention was required. People was building the houses by themselves, using traditional building techniques, using local materials, and they know what to do. They know what will withstand earthquake, what not, which reinforcements were needed, in the corners, and this was very knowledge that was not that didn't require any technical intervention for hundreds of years. But then obviously contemporary building techniques started, tourism started to be there, and people started to lose the knowledge of how to build with these systems, and they started to treat these old buildings in the same way that contemporary structures are treated. So let's open a door, let's open a window, let's just take this wall out because I want a larger living space. But with the vernacular building techniques, you cannot do that because that will affect the structure irreversibly, and that obviously affects how it behaves with an earthquake. And all of these started to require the technical knowledge again. And this is where you know, like there are several things. With this paper, I just covered a little aspect on how to understand tradition as an adaptation, really, instead of just saying tradition looks like the heritage building, and we're not really sure what is the heritage building. We just, you know, create this kind of, this is it, we'll repeat it all over, and it's not really that, and it has not really helped to create a heritage environment as it used to be. And it's not going back. It's much more of understanding that these are lived heritage. You know, people living there, and they have the right to live in the way they want, and not to be imposed a heritage design that it doesn't really fit what they need. So we need to work with them, and with these technologies, we can work with them and try to return that knowledge to them, because at the end of the day, it's the people living there who are going to retrofit the houses and who are going to maintain them in order to be prepared for the next earthquake.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any further questions to our presenters? Okay, so if there's no further question, let's bring this session to a close. My thanks to all three presenters, and also thank you all for attending. I think our conference program is there is a break after this session, and then there is another few parallel sessions starting. I can't remember the exact time, but so after a break, there are several other parallel sessions. And please do find out the information on the conference program, and do choose a session that you're interested to attend. Yeah, thank you all very much for attending this session. Bye-bye.